Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather, and when I'm not teaching middle school math, I like to read books. We are done with quarter one of the year, so let's talk about what I read in January, February, and March, and talk about some of those statistics. I've pulled most of my stats from StoryGraph, which is the app I prefer to use when I am tracking my reading. And in the months of January, February, and March, I read a total of 17 books. In January, I read 7 books. I was definitely on a thriller kick. I started the year by getting some thrillers from Book of the Month, and you can see that evidenced in my the mood pie chart from StoryGraph. So most of the books I read were emotional, dark, mysterious, and tense. I also read some amazing literary fiction during this month too, and we'll talk about that in a second when I talk about my highest rated books of the first quarter. In February, I got COVID, and this really affected my reading. You would think, oh, you're home for a week, there's nothing to do but read or listen to audiobooks. No, I was miserable, so I stayed at home and slept, or I was in so much pain that I could think of nothing but curling up in a ball and disappearing. But once I got to the tail end of COVID, I did pick up my first book of February, and I managed to read 4 books. Again, with the thrillers, I read a lot of them, and the books that I read were mostly mysterious and dark in the month of February. And then finally in March, my reading picked back up. I was on spring break. I think I read 3.5 books in a week, which is good for me. And you can tell that those books were mostly mysterious and dark. So again, kind of on a thriller kick. My highest rated books from quarter one, so my 5 stars, were Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. This is a book following different characters and how they weave together. We have an elderly woman who is a maintenance worker at an aquarium, and she befriends an octopus named Marcellus. And then we also have this other point of view from a young man named Cameron, who is kind of lost in the world. He's very immature, and he's just looking for a place where he fits. And we see these characters as they intertwine and become a part of each other's lives. I now want to go to the aquarium and see every octopus that I can. I don't have an aquarium near me, and so I feel like this needs to happen very soon, but I fell in love with Marcellus. I actually listened to this on audio, and I listened to the end on the way to work one day and sobbed in the car, and all my makeup was gone, and my kids asked me if I was okay, and no, I wasn't. I was emotionally wrecked. I adored this book, and it will be a favorite for a long time to come. Another 5-star book I read was Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. I had put this book off last year. I don't know why. I don't think the cover really appealed to me, but I picked it up at the Barnes & Noble 50% hardcover sale that they had going on over Christmas. And oh my gosh, was this book good. So we follow Elizabeth Zott, who is a scientist. We have a tiny love story that is really the most minimal part of that book. We follow her as she's kind of looked down on for being a woman in science in the 60s in America. Instead of, constantly being shoved to the side, she takes matters into her own hands. She gets a cooking show on nighttime TV, and America falls in love with her, but she does not use her platform to tell a housewife how to be a housewife. She uses her platform to tell the American woman how to stand up for herself. And I thought this was a brilliant book. Not only that, there is a dog, and his name is 630, and we get points of view from the dog, and that sold me. This is also going to be an Apple TV show series, so I'm definitely looking forward to that. So loved Lessons in Chemistry, highly recommend picking it up. Another 5-star read was The Man Who Died Twice by Richard Osman. This is the second book in the Thursday Murder Club series, and this series has my heart. So this was more of a mystery than a thriller. We are following 4 individuals who live in a retirement village on the English countryside. It's about their relationships with each other and the world around them, but they also have a club where they meet on Thursdays, and they try and solve cold cases. They're like a little true crime loving bunch. But things hit a little bit too close to home, and our squad of characters end up actually having to solve a murder in the first book. And so this storyline carries into the second. We get to know our characters even more. There are some serious things like Alzheimer's and what it's like to grow old and not have anybody to care for you that are explored in this book. And I just think it's beautiful. The way I've described the Thursday Murder Club to people is mystery meets Frederick Bachman. It has that kind of tone where The author just really understands the human experience and what it's like to write about it, but you also get murder mystery thrown into this one. I love this series. The 4th one is coming out in September, and I cannot wait. So those were all my 5-star books, but I do want to give a shout out to an honorable mention, a 4.5-star book. And that was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I recently read Hellbent, which is the sequel, and I gave it 5 stars. So far this series is just top tier to me. Moving on to my lowest rated books of the year, which it feels even silly to say that so far. My lowest rated books of quarter 1 all had 3 stars. So we're not hating any books. We're just kind of giving them an average rating. And the 2 books that I gave 3 stars in quarter 1 were Kind Worth Saving by Peter Swanson. This is the kind of sequel to The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. That was one of the first thrillers I ever read, and I adored it. I thought it was so clever, and so I was very much anticipating The Kind Worth Saving. I actually got to read it early before its release date thanks to a friend who had gotten a copy, and it fell flat for me. I thought that the villain in this was very good, very unhinged, and I enjoyed reading from that particular character's point of view. However, I found it a little bit predictable, and then also it touches on a topic that I just am not comfortable with. I'm going to mention it here, so fast forward about 30 seconds if you don't want to hear it. But this book has a heavy reliance on the plot point of school shootings. I am a teacher. Y'all have been watching the news. It's something that's been going on in our country, and it terrifies me, and I just prefer not to read anything dealing with that plot point from here onward. So it really bothered me, and I don't know, 3 stars just seemed right to give this book. I also listened to A Flicker in the Dark on audio. This is by Stacey Willingham, and it was her debut novel. I read this one after reading her second novel, and A Flicker in the Dark just wasn't as good to me. This book was very predictable, in my opinion. Not only was it predictable, I figured the main thing out in the first 15% of the book. And while I don't mind predicting things that happen in a book, when it happens that early, it just takes the fun out of it for me. I did enjoy the atmosphere that Stacey Willingham tends to create in her flashbacks. I noticed this in both books. They're very moody, they're very Southern, they're very Gothic feeling, and she does an excellent job with that. So while I did give this book 3 stars, I gave her second book a higher rating, and I look forward to seeing what else she does in the future. Some notes that I made about my quarter 1 reading. I read mostly thriller mystery. I was definitely in the mood for it, but I'm starting to feel a little bit burnt out on the genre because everything is just starting to feel very, very predictable. Thriller has been one of my top 2 genres for the last several years, and I just think I'm reading so many that I'm not able to be surprised anymore. So I'm kind of putting those to the side until some highly anticipated thrillers come out later this year. And then I also surprised myself with how much I did enjoy the literary fiction books that I read, those being Remarkably Bright Creatures and Lessons in Chemistry. This is not a genre I pick up all that often. I was just very impressed with the emotional chokehold both of those books had on me, and they made me want to read some more. I do have some more Frederick Bachman books I have not read yet, and so those put me in the mood to pick those up once I have time to devote to crying my eyes out. Let me know how your quarter 1 went, what your highly anticipated books for quarter 2 are, and if you read any of the books that I mentioned in this video. Talk to you in the next one.